ProdigyTeks founder and MSP Unplugged podcast host Paco Lebron joins this week to talk about news from SkyKick and Datto, as well as wealth management for tech managers, plus a special guest interview with Steve Alexander from MSP-Ignite with an insightful look at peer groups and how they can help you. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 248, NAP Statistics. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 248. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host for this fine audio and visual program targeted to you. And you are the VARs, the MSPs, the IT consultants, the IT integrators, the managed services, security providers that are keeping people safe from the nefarious out there. I threw a lot of acronyms out there. If you understood any of those, you are definitely in the right place. If you did not understand any of those, well, hell, you're in the right place anyway, because I don't know if we even understand what all of those acronyms mean all the time. So welcome one and all. We are glad you are all here for this fine episode. Joining me this week and most weeks is the man of the hour, the guy who keeps the schedules going here at ChannelPro and keeps you on top of all of the stuff that's happening. That is executive editor Rich Friedman. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Matt, and welcome to you and everybody in our audience to December. We are in the final month of 2022.
It is December. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even really look at the calendar today. The days have blended together the last few weeks. But yeah, happy December, end of the year. I would say usually this is the time of year that like Thanksgiving is over. It's a little quieter. There's not quite as much going on, but that's not true this year because there's not one but two virtual events coming up that we have in December here that we can talk about briefly, but also just all kinds of other stuff. Like it's nonstop, Rich. We had a small break for Thanksgiving, and here we are again, diving back into the thick of things. But you know what's nice, Rich, though, is that we are not diving into the month of December on this show alone. We have a fantastic and awesome guest host returning with us. Very excited to have him back. If you're listening to this show, you probably listen to his as well. So it's exciting when we can have a fellow podcaster on. But who am I talking about? I'm talking about the founder and CEO of ProdigyTeks.com. He serves as an MSP dedicated to the evolving technology world and the people who want to embrace it. He has over 15 years of experience in the IT industry, focusing on small business consulting and solutions. He's also the host of the MSP Unplugged podcast. Please welcome the one, the only, the awesome Paco Lebron. Welcome, Paco.
Hello. How's everyone doing today?
We are, I can't speak for Rich. I'm well. I'm just super stoked that you're back on with us. It's always a pleasure when you pop into one of our events, or if you come on the show and do an episode with us. It's just always a lot of fun, and it's great to have you back. But Rich, I don't want to speak for you. How are you?
I am great, thank you.
Good.
Simple enough. He is great. He is good. We are all good. So Rich, we got some events coming up. I want to talk about that, but first I want to give Paco a chance to tell us what, for those who may have missed a previous episode that he was on, because he's been on several. Tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about ProdigyTeks and a little bit more about your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So again, Paco Lebron over at ProdigyTeks. We're an MSP out of Chicago, and actually Chicago. So apparently there's a term being called Chicago proper, which Matt, you may have heard this because I never heard this because I'm from Chicago. And at an event I went to, they were asking, well, where are you from? Oh, Chicago. Oh, well, where? I was, Chicago. Do you mean the neighborhood? Like, no, I mean like Glen Ellen or, Rockford, or no, I'm actually in Chicago. So yes, I'm in the West Loop of downtown Chicago. Been around now close to 10 years in February. MSP, about 7 people, employees, ranging anywhere from the whole nation of the US and some in Latin America and in Mexico as well. So very diverse, very remote work, right? The new term that everyone is starting to use nowadays. And yeah, we provide managed services and cybersecurity services to small and medium-sized businesses, and mostly in the legal, manufacturing, and private healthcare phases. So that's a little bit about the MSP. And then MSP Unplugged, my other side business, which I am the podcast host for that podcast. It is a weekly podcast. We have 2 of them a week. We have one where we introduce a fellow IT provider, whether they're as the acronyms as Matt has mentioned in the beginning of the show, along with my business partner Rick Smith, who is also an MSP out in New Jersey, who's been on the show as well. And we both host an in-person event every September as well called TechCon Unplugged. So a little bit for there on both sides there, but yeah, keeps us busy, keeps me busy. But more importantly, great to and happy to be on here at ChannelPro. ChannelPro always feels like home because it's one of the first events that I went to when I really started getting serious about the business. And when you had it here in Chicago, up by Rosemont. So everyone at ChannelPro, from you, Matt, Rich, Jay-Z, Michael, all the team, we always have a great time talking to everyone there. Any chance we get to collaborate or just shoot the stuff, it's always a pleasure to chat with you all. So appreciate you coming back on.
And when he says shoot stuff, like he means like the breeze, not like we're actually like
right. We're not actually.
I know you're from Chicago, so that's a very normal thing where you're from. But
no livestock or anyone was harmed in this statement.
that's not what we're doing at our events. We're not a hunting show or anything like that. So yeah, well, it's great to have you here, and I'm sure that many of our listeners are probably familiar with you as well, just from the other show that you do, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. So Rich, he mentioned events. I want to talk about that quickly to so people know what's going on. But we've got one of those coming up, 2 actually. But one is biometrics focused. So you can probably mention that if you want. But what do we got going on next week that people will want to know about, because it's gonna be a big one.
Well, I am going to mention 2 actually, because you are working on the biometrics event, but I am working on something we're doing in January, which is not that far away. So I want to talk about that event too. But first, let's start with next week. On December 7th, Wednesday, December 7th, we will be doing our second Cybersecurity Online Summit event of 2022, second and final. I will be moderating a session on threat intelligence. This is good stuff, folks, because threat intelligence is the thing that can really help you keep on top of what's happening in the world and on the internet that you need to protect your customers from. But separating the signal from noise is hugely difficult. So we're going to talk a little bit about actually putting threat intelligence to work in a practical way. We're going to talk about IoT security, smart gadgets, and keeping that secure. Our good buddy Ian Thornton Trump, who February 2021 came on an earlier Cybersecurity Online Summit, and for half an hour he just took questions live from the audience and answered them. He is one of the foremost security experts in the world, truly, and one of the most informed security experts we know at ChannelPro. He's coming back December 7th to answer your questions live and on the air again. We've got a session on cyber insurance and maybe turning that into an asset for your business as opposed to a headache. So lots of good stuff, and it's a virtual event. We never run out of room for you, folks. So go to events.channelpronetwork.com. You can still register and join us, and we would like to see you next week. Now, whether or not you can make it to that event, you can certainly make it to our next online summit event, which is our Managed Services and Cloud online summit event. That one takes place January 18th, about a month and a half from now, right at the beginning of next year. And we're going to dive into the finer points of managing techs there. So at a time when people are changing jobs, it's hard to get and keep good people. What do you do to manage technicians so that they're productive and they're doing the right things for the business, but you're also keeping them engaged and motivated and on board? We've got a session on cloud computing cost control and some of the secrets to optimizing costs for yourself and your customers. We've got a co-managed IT 201 session. So at this point, I think folks kind of know what co-managed IT is. How do the pros really do that well and profitably? And then we'll get into a comparative session on public clouds. And I'll just drop a hint. This is going to come up again actually later in the show, something related to that. But lots of good stuff in that event. Same thing, events.channelpronetwork.com. Register now, and we hope to see you next month.
Awesome stuff. And I will put it out there just because there might be a few of you out there, but we have a biometrics event coming up. For those who may not know, we have the ChannelPro network is the primary thing, but we also have a couple other like what do you call them, like sister brands, if you will, that kind of go into this. So one of them is the Fine Biometrics and Mobile ID World that focuses just on the biometric space. And there is an event coming up on December. It's a virtual event, I should say, virtual event. So it's easy to attend. Virtual event on December 14th, the Enterprise Biometrics Online Summit. So if you're interested in biometrics and the way it works in enterprise, it might be of interest to you. Also, events.channelpronetwork.com. You'll find a link to register for that. Come and join us. Promo code. What's the promo code? It's CPVIP this year, I believe.
I believe that's correct. Yep.
And then I'll throw a graphic up on the screen for next year with a QR code to register. The promo code for next year, if you're a ChannelPro Weekly listener, is I believe CPWEEKLY. It's on the graphic. I don't have it up right now, but for those who are listening, just for those who are listening, they can't. We'll put it in the show notes. I'm pretty sure it's CPWEEKLY. Go and register and do that. So awesome stuff. So Rich, do you want to dive into the news? What do you want to do? Do you want to talk to Paco a little bit, see what's going on in his world?
You know what I'll do here, and we didn't plan this in advance, and if you don't want to do it, Paco, you don't have to, but the last time I saw you physically face-to-face in 3 dimensions, it was in Miami at the Acronis CyberFit Summit event. And yep. I was there on the ground for like 24 hours before I went to the next show that I attended that week. And by the way, were you in Florida for the hurricane too?
I was there. So I was there at a Acronis Cyber Fit Summit in Miami, and then took the bus that they orchestrated for IT Nation later that week. And yeah, we were definitely in the middle of the hurricane for sure. I think there was a lot of concern for those that were not in Florida in that time to say, well, man, this is pretty wild. And everyone in Florida was like, it's rain, you'll be okay. So the show went on for sure. I think there was a little concern, but it was a good time overall at both.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing, actually, how, because you're looking out the window at IT Nation in particular, and you're seeing trees blowing sideways and so on. But indoors, power never flickered. It just, the show goes on. It was amazing. And you mentioned something we should call out. Kudos to Acronis. So there were 3 events taking place in Florida in that same week, and there were a lot of people who were kind of trying to figure out which one do I go to, and the Acronis folks were very clever. They said, if you come to our event and you want to go to IT Nation, we'll take you there. Like they chartered a bus or buses, and they drove a bunch of their attendees out to Orlando from Miami to attend that event. I've never really seen something like that before. I thought it was really smart, and I assume it saved you some money and was kind of convenient.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting, that story, because originally I was not going to IT Nation, and there was a few times where, throughout the months it was like, I can go, but there's just so much stuff going on in my world. And finally I was like, we had the ability to go, but then it was like 2 weeks or a week before or something like that. So, obviously flights are pretty up there. How were we going to get from Miami to Orlando? And so when they came out with the newsletter saying, hey, because you're coming, we'll go ahead and coordinate a bus for you, which I thought was a class act for them to even do that, but also obviously, as you mentioned, smart for people to attend their show as well. So yeah, it was a smooth 3 hours. I was on the bus with Tom Lawrence, Harry Bredsfield, a couple others as well. Made the most out of it, and yeah, it was a very smooth 3 hour drive out there. So it was it was definitely an interesting, but like you said, the weather was one of those where it's like, we should kind of take a look. But I think Thursday was the most impactful of weather. But other than that, everything went well, and ended up going to Disney on Friday. So it all worked out.
So let's talk Acronis. You and I were in the same briefings, the same general sessions. I'm sure I talked about news out of that show on the podcast before, but I haven't really gotten any input from an actual ChannelPro who is in attendance at the show. And so just at this point, it's been long enough, it's not even first impressions anymore. What do you think about what they were talking about at the show? What struck you about it?
I really liked the show this year because I was there. We were both there last year, and last year was very more partner focused, right? On their tools, how to make the most out of it, operations, things of that nature. This year, it was really a solution provider show. Like there was really value that was outside of the product, although there was product demos and descriptions and things of that nature, and they had a couple releases as well in their platform. But it was a really rounded show. I mean, I had a lot of great information that we got. You know, Eric Simpson had a great session this year as well. I sat on his. There was a couple others, but it was just the collaborativeness of all the team and the staff to really focus on the solution provider, whether they are reselling a few of their part of their services or actually providing managed services. Everyone had an ability to get something out of it. So I thought it was a really great and done show this year compared to last.
Yeah, and it's interesting how often people who go to these vendor events appreciate the ones that are, just kind of sharing information. It's a given that these companies are going to talk about their products and so on. But if that's all they do, I think, they're maybe less valuable to the attendees. The ones that people seem to speak most highly of are the ones where they're actually also just kind of sharing some information that'll help you run your business better.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, very good, and I'm glad that no harm came to you with trees blowing sideways. It looks like you got through that okay and made it back home. And to today be here to talk about more than Acronis, because we've got quite a few things to talk about today. We're going to talk about SkyKick. They're in the news. We're going to talk about Datto, Datto / Kaseya / I don't know, whatever other names that they have associated with them these days. We're going to talk about wealth management for tech managers. That sounds like an interesting story to discuss. And then if all goes according to plan, and the plans for this episode have changed a little bit because we should be recording an interview tomorrow with Steve Alexander from MSP-Ignite about peer groups and best practices and how to prepare for a strong 2023. Well, we're doing that tomorrow, so but schedules are getting moved around. If that doesn't happen, my apologies. We'll have that interview in a future show. But we got a lot to dive into. So, Rich, why don't we just kind of go right to the news here and talk about SkyKick?
And I'm going to say right up front here that this is like the catch-up episode of ChannelPro Weekly here. I mean, and it'll sound weird to a lot of people listening to or watching the show right now for me to say it was kind of a slowish news week because as we speak, AWS is doing its reInvent event in Las Vegas right now, and there's been a torrent of AWS news hitting out there. But we don't do a ton, and this is going to come up in a few minutes. We don't do a ton of coverage on AWS here. I haven't been writing about that event. So a lot of what we're going to talk about in the show this week is stuff that we just haven't had an opportunity to talk about in recent weeks. And a lot of this stuff happened in October. And here we are at the very beginning of December. We're finally getting a chance to talk about it. And that includes this story from SkyKick. Now, SkyKick, for folks who don't know them, they are and I would call them one of the original cloud management vendors. Basically, their purpose from the get-go was to help MSPs and other channel pros out there get into the cloud, build and run a cloud practice. They introduced a new product just a few weeks back, and this doesn't happen very often for them. This is only their fourth product, but they introduced a whole new system that they're calling Security Manager, and it's all about cloud security management. The basic premise behind it is that unless you have like 2 clients right now, you are probably dealing with an enormous amount of alerts. As one of their executives said to me, if you've got 1,000, 2,000 users, depending on the size of your company, you could be getting 5,000, 10,000 alerts on a regular basis. Figuring out which ones you really need to act on and what to do, it's a needle in a haystack kind of situation. So the scale of the problem, the complexity of the problem, there really is a strong need for both consolidation and automation around security management. So that's what they've done. Basically, they've introduced a tool. It's primarily at this point for securing Microsoft 365, plugs into the Microsoft Cloud backend, pulls up a consolidated, prioritized view of current alerts and vulnerabilities. And then significantly, there are workflows in the system that you can use with a single click to remediate the issue. So they say they've got, just out of the box when you install the system, they say they've got thousands of different potential security scenarios covered with pre-existing workflows There is also a no-code interface that you can use, kind of a drag and drop interface you can use to create your own custom workflows, or presumably customize the ones that are provided. So single pane of glass view of Microsoft 365 alerts, automated tools for resolving that. There's also kind of an interesting feature built just around the Microsoft security score. And security score, as most folks know, is something that you can get on a client-by-client basis from Microsoft. It kind of shows you on a 0 to 100 scale how secure you are. But you're left kind of on your own devices, basically, to sort of figure out, well, why is it at that, why is it an 80 and not an 85 or a 65 and so on? And so they have a tool in here that will kind of break down the components that went into that score and kind of help you weight them a little bit. So the biggest problem holding this customer's security score back is this issue over here, and then here's what you can do to fix that. There are reports in there if you want to see, how many end users are there without MFA in place. There are reports and tools for calling up that kind of stuff. So like I mentioned, they don't have a ton of products at SkyKick. This is their fourth product. The first one was a data migration tool. So this is when, Microsoft 365 was still Office 365. And the initial challenge was, I've got all this on-prem data, I got to get it into the cloud. That was what their first tool was about. Then it's like, okay, I migrated all that data, I've got to protect it. Second product was a cloud backup solution. The big one, which came out just a few years ago, was Cloud Manager, which was about providing a single pane of glass, multi-cloud kind of management interface. And if you're familiar with that tool, a lot of what I just described is going to sound familiar from Cloud Manager, because they basically just took that foundation and built Security Manager on top of it. So the workflows concept, the no-code interface, a lot of what's in Security Manager is sort of borrowed from Cloud Manager. And now along comes the Security Manager product, and it's kind of an interesting milestone, or maybe a reflection of the fact that we're reaching a point here where cloud security management is a big enough problem for enough MSPs out there that it really does kind of need and deserve its own family of products. SkyKick now has a product. Augment has a product that does a lot of similar kind of things that you'll find, Jump Cloud. There are others out there. We're sort of in this phase now that just off the top of my head, I would say we've been in the last maybe 18 months tops, where the complexity and the urgency of the cloud security issue has started to spawn a whole bunch of systems with really specialized functionality.
So that's a good place to turn it over to you, Paco. So how much of a pain point has this been for you? Is it becoming a pain point? Are you looking at cloud management tools like this to kind of help you with that? What's your thoughts here?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So back when the shelter in place happened back 2 years ago, and everyone kind of went remote work from anywhere. We made this strategic decision to start thinking cloud first and being able to really focus on, how do we leverage not using on-prem stuff anymore? How do we get it to the cloud, whether that's email, public cloud for file sharing, et cetera, et cetera. And then now diving into virtualization. But this is definitely a product that's needed. I think this is where the industry is starting to go and has been going for quite some time. We are an Augment partner. So we actually have been able to handle a lot of these things, especially like you mentioned in the article, is the security piece. I think that as complex as Microsoft is, even a technician or a business owner on a best day makes a human error, just out of either regimen or just missed it by just plain dumb luck. And sometimes it bites you. You think you had MFA turned on for all your clients and maybe an onboarding didn't happen. So these type of tools really help with that, focusing on your secure score, looking at your MFA statuses, things of that nature, makes it so much easier for you to be able to get to that point. So
very interesting. So, Rich, they talk in here that they're doing a lot of stuff about security, and dealing with things like alerts. So, Paco, what are you using to kind of help you filter through alerts to find the important stuff? Is there a tool that a process that you've been kind of using or relying on, or is that still a pain point that you're trying to solve?
It is a pain point. I know that there are tools that are looking to fix this. I know that Gradient just recently came out with an alert component with their Comet Backup. For those that are on Comet Backup, I believe they're going to be expanding that solution, and that's kind of the idea behind that product. But I think having the ability to filter those alerts is a huge pain point. We still go through that. We've actually switched vendors because we had a backup vendor prior to December that we've now went back to our previous vendor because the alerts weren't as cumbersome, because it just seems like there's a lot of false positives that are happening, and trying to filter that through, our technicians get that alert fatigue, which is what you don't want to happen, right? Because that's when you need the one alert that should have alerted us, went through the wayside. So it's definitely a problem still. I have not heard anyone try to battle this outside of Gradient, but again, it could be there is someone out there that may have came out with something that I'm not aware of yet.
So they didn't talk about pricing, so I guess you don't have to contact them to talk about pricing. But Paco, are you finding that cloud management is reasonable or expensive? What are you seeing out there?
I'm seeing it's being fair. It's adding on to a tool set that you have. Obviously, it's got to be a complement for a lot of things, which is what Augment does for us, and I'm sure SkyKick does for a lot of their partners, especially those that are using their migration tool and kind of been building on to those fields. I know there are some that have different pricing approaches where it's kind of more of a, hey, purchase this suite of tools and you'll get the rest for included, kind of like a bundle. And then there are those that are charging it a la carte. For me and a lot of the smaller MSPs and solution providers, I think the a la carte method is easier to handle, just because you could kind of quantify where those resources are going to. But I think for a lot of the solutions now are very, very aggressive in allowing you to be able to adopt their product, especially like Jump Cloud. They have an amazing intro offer for those. I think it's like the first 10 users are free, and then it past 11, and they help you grow with those trying to start off. So there are plenty of vendors out there that can help achieve for this, especially as I mentioned before, this is really where the industry is going. So if you haven't picked a partner, the article lists a couple good ones. So definitely take a look at all of them and see what's your jam.
Yeah, and where can you find that article? Of course, ChannelProNetwork.com is the website you can find that at. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. So if you're on your phone, you can open up the description area there, and we put the links to all the articles that we're talking about, because there's a lot more detail in here than what we're covering. We're just kind of talking about the high level view of this stuff. But if you want to read along and get all the details and all the links that go to other places to learn more, we'll put that. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the bell, hit the subscribe, I don't know, hit all. There's a lot of buttons, Paco's like, yeah, hit them all, except for the thumbs down. We don't like that one. Don't hit that button, but leave a comment as well, and we want to hear your thoughts on these stories as well. Rich, anything else to talk about on this particular one, or shall we move forward?
Just one quick final point, which is that companies like SkyKick and Augment and Jump Cloud and Nerdio out there in Chicago have kind of had the cloud management realm to themselves until very, very recently, like literally the last 6 months or so. But Enable has a product out. They've got another one coming very shortly. We're any day now. The new edition of Kaseya's VSA RMM system comes out. That'll do cloud management. And ConnectWise was kind of demoing a proof of concept. So the big names in managed services are getting into cloud management now, and we are kind of finally at that point where MSPs are going to have that kind of decision to make. Do I go with a born in the cloud management first kind of vendor like SkyKick, or do I just expand the suite of products I'm already using, and everything integrates and so on and so forth? It'll be interesting to see that. I asked they have two CEOs at SkyKick. I asked them, how do you kind of think about that competitive landscape? And they basically said, we've been doing this for a decade. We've got a huge head start on these guys, and that's going to work to our advantage. That's where they see their competitive edge. So they did not sound the slightest bit afraid, but it'll be interesting to see where we go from here.
All right, we will have to see, and it's certainly been something that we've been talking about on the show a lot over the last couple of years. Is these solutions have kind of grown and come out, and there's a lot of interest and demand there, it seems. So we'll be following that going forward as well. But we're gonna move forward a little bit into the next story, and that is about Datto, who's they've got a report out that reveals challenges. Like nobody, Rich, it's the end of the year. Nobody wants to hear about challenges coming up in the future. We just want to hear that we all get to take a nap. Is that Datto's solution, to take a nap?
Yeah, I just recently poured through the report we're going to be talking about. I can't remember if they had any nap related statistics in there, but I don't believe they did.
Paco, is it important that you and your technicians nap every day?
I mean, I think there's a good quality rest opportunities for sure throughout the day. But I also went through that article and did not see any of the rest opportunities. So I'm a little disappointed by that. But, they do talk about a lot of important stuff in there. So,
all right. Well, we won't talk about rest. We'll talk about challenges. Rich, what kind of challenges are we going to be facing?
Well, first, let me tell you what we're talking about. And here again, this came out a few weeks ago. This is our first chance to talk about it. And I put it on the show for this week, in part because I recorded a webinar with Datto yesterday, and it was largely about this research study that they published a few weeks back. And in preparing for that, I came across some nuggets. So Datto every year publishes their State of the MSP research study. This time for 2022, they went out to, I believe, 1,800 MSPs around the world, collected a whole bunch of interesting information. So I'm just going to run through some interesting little nuggets from that report and just kind of get some impressions, especially from Paco, because you are an actual MSP as opposed to somebody who writes about them. So challenges. This was one of the things Datto asked about. What are your top challenges as an MSP? The number one item that came on the list, 29% kind of checked this off the list, was competition. And that came in ahead, not a bunch ahead, but a little bit ahead of revenue growth, profitability, acquiring new customers, hiring. Like those all sound like pretty familiar challenges for MSPs. The number one challenge, at least in 2022, is competition, which was kind of interesting to me. And it tells you something about where we are in the evolution of managed services and the density of MSPs out there. And I'll bet you that is especially true in Chicago. What do you think, Paco?
So it's interesting, right? So I read the article, and that's not a concern of mine, is competition, but you're right. The M&A, I know why people are concerned about competition. There's the M&A landscape that is really concerning to a lot of smaller MSPs. And I think that the bigger concern is, you have, the 20, they're going through a big acquisition phase. I think now they're up to 11, I think was the last I read in a recent article. Our good friend, here in Chicago, Joanna Muroff over at MXO Tech got acquired by, I think it's Nativa is the name of the MSP that acquired her. So, and, right down the door from me. And so I think a lot of the M&A landscape is starting to get closer and closer to home for a lot of MSPs and managed service providers and solutions providers, right? I think my whole big spiel, and I've been saying this for years, is that I don't think it should be a big concern, because you can battle this in two ways. Obviously, you can go into the M&A arena and get your business up to a point where you can sell or acquire and go through that growth realm, or build out a series of network solution providers and MSP like yourselves and build yourselves to be a similar company, a good foundation where you all do kind of similar business practices. You all kind of are trying to lean on each other because you all use the same systems, the same tools, et cetera, and operate as a network. So if I have someone that is down in Florida, then I can have someone go be boots on the ground and help us out in that realm. And we can help volunteer and vice versa, and having and build that trusted network and kind of leveraging from there. And that's, the big piece about community, which I'm sure, we'll go into in the interview on how powerful community, not only just on an information basis, but on a networking and peer level to really grow your business. But that's my opinion on competition and that avenue. I think there's ways to take care of that or address it as you go into 2023.
And I kind of mentioned I'll bet you the competition issue and the density of MSPs is especially intense in Chicago. And as you're talking about that, I remember or I'm remembering a conversation I had with an MSP about a year ago at a conference, and he has an office in downtown Chicago proper. His headquarters is in Schaumburg, and I forget there's a third office in a satellite of downtown Chicago somewhere. And he told me at one point that there are, I think it was 20 other MSPs within a square mile of his office. And I was like, the downtown office, right? He was like, no, Schaumburg.
No, Schaumburg.
Yeah. But so 20 different companies, ostensibly doing what he does within a square mile of him in Schaumburg. And he says there's only one he ever runs into in competitive situations. It's like, there's enough business out there and enough niches to specialize in and so on. It's possible for 21 companies, to cover the same corner of the world and not even bump into each other, let alone compete with one another. So that is it's sort of an interesting counter maybe to the idea that competition is challenge number one.
And that's a good point, right? And sorry, Matt, that, we always have that. We all have that one that we lose deals to that we know of, right? And so we could say like, okay, they're the ones that we kind of have to keep an eye on. But as far as, like you said, mostly it's like, you just don't know who's around the corner. Sometimes I'll drive down a particular road and, I see a managed service provider in the big building. I was like, I had no idea they were here. So, it's interesting to see the growth, right? And there are always new MSPs popping up too.
Yeah. And so the competition angle is interesting because there's, as you said, there's a lot of local providers and that can specialize and do lots of different things. How much of the concern is the kind of the rise of the regional or national competition happening where these giant MSPs buy tons and then have like kind of a more national footprint? Do those freak you out at all, or are you able to kind of, even while being small, able to respond to how they operate?
So it's funny you say that. So I actually, when an acquisition happens in Chicago with a bigger MSP, there's a churn rate because they're trying to integrate them into their systems. 9 times out of 10, we get a lot of good qualified leads when these periods happen, because either they went into the new, because when the acquisitions happen, it's usually an MSP like myself or a little bit bigger, and now they're on this national front where they don't have that intimate connection. They don't have hey, Brian knows where my PC is. I don't have to tell the technician every time I call in where it's at and what the issue is. Like, they're going through these protocol and tickets. So I've actually received, when these periods happen, that's when we get an influx of qualified leads, because there are people looking to find that personal touch again. And that's happened actually twice already, where a bigger national MSP acquired one of my colleagues in the area, and their clients ended up calling us to see if there's anything we can do for them, because things were just not on the proper of their expectation that they were hoping for.
Interesting. Do you find it harder to get? So you're saying when it happens, it's you get an influx of leads. Long term, though, do you find that a lot of leads kind of just gravitate towards the larger ones, or are you seeing that they're still like looking for more of a local provider?
I think it's just different strokes for different folks, right? I think it's really a big piece where, we've had a client recently that outgrew us because they wanted the 24/7, the bigger avenue of what they can do, but they wouldn't pay the rate that they wanted to. So there are those that can make it more efficient for them as well. So I think there's an ability and work for everyone. But I am not particularly concerned too much about, at least on that realm, as probably some of my other colleagues and peers.
Well, that's good to know. Rich, what are some of the other challenges that they're talking about in here?
Well, this is not so much a challenge. This is just sort of a data point that came out of the study that really interested me, and I've been kind of hinting all along that we're gonna touch on this eventually here on the show. So we have that session coming up at our January event, in which we'll be kind of stacking up and comparing and contrasting Microsoft Azure and AWS and Google Cloud. And I forget who it was who kind of pitched that idea when we were, coming up with session ideas, Matt. I think it might have been Colleen Fry, our managing editor, but it came up, and my first thought was, our readership, it very, very heavily Microsoft oriented. Are they really going to be interested in these other clouds. And we talked about it and decided, yeah, actually, that's a good topic. Let's put that in the event. And literally like 3 or 4 hours after that conversation, I stumble across this fact from Datto's report. They asked people, what clouds are you using right now? And are your customers using? Number 1 on the list, AWS, 54%. Number 2 on the list, Azure, 47%. Google Cloud, 40%. And those numbers line up, relatively well to sort of the worldwide market share numbers for those 3 big platforms. I would not have expected that 54% of Datto's MSP partners are doing something on AWS, or that it would be relatively far out in front of Azure. I would have just, given the historical sort of Microsoft orientation of the ChannelPro world, I did not anticipate these numbers. Are they surprising to you, Paco?
A little bit, but I think it's probably those that got into the cloud game early, right? I think those that, because AWS was the forefront runner for so many years, and I think is still now. When you think public cloud, everyone defaults to AWS. I think Microsoft is starting to have that conversation where now you have both to kind of consider each other. But yeah, and I think now that the fact that it's even more easier to get AWS, because I think the issue with AWS was the people, and with any public cloud, is the complex billing, the complex deployment. What do I charge the client so I don't get left with the bill, things of that nature. And now that Pax8 is now offering AWS as well, which is one of the top cloud distributors that are offering cloud services, I think now I can see that percentage being either closer to or maybe even higher with that adoption. But it is a little surprising, but not so much, because I could only imagine, because that was the de facto for so long.
You mentioned Pax8. They added AWS to their lineup in April this year, and that was the first thing that sort of got my attention. Maybe there's more AWS going on out there than I realized, because they certainly saw it as a growth opportunity for themselves and their partners, but they were also kind of responding to things that they were seeing in the market. So that was the first sign I got that maybe AWS is getting traction in the ChannelPro world. Yeah, so this is definitely something for us to be keeping a closer eye on. I think that and the Google footprint as well. There are a lot of MSPs out there selling and supporting Workspace from Google, and be interesting to see if that kind of bleeds over into the infrastructure as well. One last data point from the Datto survey before we move on. And this was interesting because it lined up more or less perfectly with something that we saw in our State of the Channel report about 6 months ago, which is that MSPs surveyed by Datto are getting 35% of their revenue from break-fix services. And that's up 11% from last year's survey. So the share of money being made on break-fix by MSPs has risen in the last year. And we saw something pretty similar to that as well in our most recent survey. I can tell you Datto's take on that in a moment, but first I'll just kind of ask you, Paco, what do you think about that?
It's funny, right? Because I think there's this big, I don't know, witch hunt, but that says break fix is dead, right? And I argue against that, because I feel that break fix, if it's broken, you got to fix it, right? Now we just fancied and we did a Teams. We put basically a skin on top of Exchange, SharePoint, and Stream. That's basically what we did with managed services and bundling. We charge for repairs and such and break fix work, and usually it's charged a la carte depending on the part. So we still do break fix, right? So break fix is not dead. Now I'm curious on how it's being quantified, right? But I think that in the ability of, I do see break fix become making a stride, right? And us actually understanding that a little bit further, because there are a lot more tools that individual technicians need to be appraised on. It's not just the normal, scan for a virus and hope for the best type situation. I think there's a lot more in depth to not only break fix on a cost perspective, right? Because, if you're not on warranty and rather than just re-imaging and turning a new machine, I think they're now starting to make conscious efforts to maintain the equipment that's being held in a particular client that a MSP or a solution provider is servicing.
So Datto's take on this, I spoke about this with Michael DePalma, their vice president of business development in North America, and I mean they're as curious about it as we are. They were as surprised to see that as we were at ChannelPro. Their take on things, based on input they're getting from MSPs, is this is probably a temporary phenomenon. Not that break fix is going away, but this 11% bump is probably a temporary phenomenon. And what they think is going on is that there was a lot of project work that was deferred, delayed, put off during the pandemic, particularly in 2020 when the economy went south and so on. And we've had supply chain issues. So even if you had the money and you wanted to do this project work, you don't have the hardware. So there's a lot of stuff that's been backed up that's starting to happen now, and therefore people are making more, now they're making more of their money on what, for purposes of the survey, MSPs are calling break fix work. It's a one-time income hit kind of a thing. And so their expectation is a year from now, this number will probably drop back down some amount, and we'll see how much.
Yeah, I think exactly like you said, it's everyone perceives that term so differently that for them, that makes total sense. For me, that's project work, in my opinion. And project work is done a little bit differently than it is with the break fix work, but I could see where they're labeling both as one as break fix. So I think, again, everyone has different ways of how they do that business and label what they do. So that's definitely makes sense in that realm of the bump is tied to that project work that may not be tied to a managed service.
Yeah, I guess how they quantify that, what is it? If the revenue is non-recurring, it's considered break fix. Is that kind of what they're saying?
I think so. So, I mean, I have, the results of the survey that they publish. I don't have that survey question. So I don't know if there was like a project work kind of option on that survey question. But based on their interpretation of what's going on, I think that's correct.
Okay, interesting. I wonder if there's been a lot of upstart, IT providers, as Paco said. Like there's 20 of them in a square mile. Do you think if some of these newer upstarts are trying to come in, you think they're taking a little bit more of the break fix business first before they go managed, or do you think that's probably not really the case?
For me, I think that when you're an upstart in general, you got to you got to take on the work to survive, right? If this is your sole income. So yeah, I would definitely think break fix is going to be first in line. Although, as they learn and understand that to be more predictable, they have to kind of maybe adjust that a little bit. But I definitely do see upstarts, looking to be a technician, now a business owner. I would say break fix is the easiest to kind of go into and the most comfortable for a technician as they grow as a business owner and kind of get into more predictable income like managed services, cloud services, etc.
Makes sense. Rich, anything else in this report that you want to talk about? It says they talk a little about hybrid workforce. Any other interesting data points there?
Not so much about hybrid work. There was an interesting, and this was so unexpected. I almost wonder, is there something wrong with the calculations or the questions or whatever? But somewhere kind of buried in there, they said that only 7% of the MSP workloads of the workloads supported by MSPs in North America are in the cloud right now. And if you just intuitively, that doesn't sound right. And if you look at some of the other statistics on that same page of the report, it's like, how can that be? That implies basically that, Europe and Asia are way, way out in front of North America on cloud adoption and so on. So, yeah, my final point would just be, this is a report I actually look forward to reading every year. We'll include a link to a press release about the study that has a link within it to the actual report. And check it out. And, it's one of those reports that you can use to kind of benchmark yourself against a little bit. And I'm sure people in the audience will find nuggets in there that, didn't even jump out at me.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. All right, well, we'll put a link to that. You can go and check out the report. And if you have any thoughts on it, want to make a comment, do so in the comments area, or send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com, or hit us up on the social channels. Last story we're going to talk about, Rich, is something about wealth management. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a story from our November issue. I hope certainly everybody in the audience here has an attorney, has an accountant. Do you have a wealth manager on your extended team as well? And before we get into why you might want to do that, I'll kick things off with a question that I used to sort of kick things off in the article, which is, have you ever considered issuing qualified small business stock in your company as part of an exit plan? Now, I will confess freely and openly, until I was working on this story, I had never heard of qualified small business stock. I still don't know a whole lot about what it works or how it works, but basically, if you do this, if you go through the process of issuing this very specific kind of stock that you're allowed to issue for a small business, potentially you can exit your business and transfer ownership to somebody else with little to no tax impact. This could have a massive positive impact on your taxes when exit time comes around. And this is the kind of thing, I think we all know what an investment advisor does, but a wealth manager is not just kind of focused on the here and now and helping you build a portfolio that's going to maximize a return on your savings and investments and so on. A wealth manager is somebody who specializes in a 360-degree view, short-term and long-term, of everything associated with the wealth, the money that you are accumulating through all of that hard work and time that you're investing in your business. And you want to preserve that, obviously, you want to maximize it, and then you want to make sure when exit time does come around that you get as much for the value of the business itself as opposed to the liquid wealth that you've generated too. So that's kind of the definition of what a wealth manager does. So, when you get a wealth manager, if you do that, you will be talking about investments, but you'll be talking about estate planning, exit planning, tax planning strategy, short and long term, insurance, life insurance, disability, errors and omissions, all that stuff that you kind of need. The typical wealth manager, in my experience with the story, will probably tell you, I'm not the insurance expert. I'm not necessarily the tax expert. Like, you have other people who know a little bit more about those subjects. I'm the quarterback, basically, on your wealth management team, who's going to make sure that you are thinking about the right things, who's going to connect you to the people who can get you the right things and so on. But they're going to be looking at every aspect of your financial health and make sure that you are aware of things you might not be thinking about, make sure that you are planning for things like an exit, like your kids going to college, which, that could be 10 years, 15 years away. Do you have a plan in place for funding that? That's the kind of thing that you can talk about with a wealth manager. Never too early. Your business is never too young for you to actually hire a wealth manager. It is never too soon in the process of that relationship for you to be talking about an exit, because as we know, that's something that you need to be building towards for a long time. And so that's something that they're going to want to incorporate into a wealth management plan for you from the get-go. And then don't think about this as a relationship that ends with the exit, because now you've sold your business, you've got this big pot of money, a bigger pot of like cash basically than you've ever had in your life. If you retired upon exit, you now need to make that money last for the rest of your life, and you want to presumably leave some of it to somebody else. If anything, you're going to need that wealth manager even more after exit to kind of help you come up with a sustainable cash flow plan. There's some advice in the article about how to actually find the right kind of wealth manager for you. Our good buddy Dave Seibert, an MSP and ChannelPro in Southern California, been on the show a bunch, spoken at our events. He made a point, and he really kind of emphasized this, that you can learn about wealth management from a wealth manager, and by all means, go ahead and hire one. But you can also learn a ton from your peers. And he has really learned some of the most valuable lessons about minimizing taxes, for example, through peer groups and interactions with other MSPs he knows. And so that's another form of wealth management advice to cultivate. But lots of advice and insight into why you might want a wealth manager and how to go about getting one.
Everybody needs one too, in fact, from what it sounds like. Paco, how many wealth managers do you have?
I mean, I heard that there was a deal not too long ago for 3 for 1, but no, I think that it's super important. We have one personally, and now kind of focusing on the business side, because I think what a lot of people or a lot of my peers should really focus on is, a lot of closures or businesses that don't succeed is not that they don't make money, is trying to understand their cash flow and understanding the way that they're managing their money. So having a wealth manager or a financial advisor, another term for the same thing, really will help you, connect you with an estate planning lawyer, being able to connect you with what is your best case scenario, what are you trying to do as your exit goal, and then connect those pieces together. And as you mentioned before, Rich, having an accountant, having a lawyer, these are all important components of a business to have. You want to have that before you need it, until not when you actually need it in an emergency, because it ends up being more pricier. There's more work to be done, things of that nature. But with wealth management, it's such a grander discussion. And I think for those that, if you can get early on the bus, it definitely will help you in the long run, whether you are planning to exit or you're building a legacy business. Either way, this is going to be beneficial for you, just to keep your eye on the ball so that what are the actual tasks and quick hits that you need to do to get to where you want to go.
Very, very good. Rich, anything else to talk about wealth management?
No, I think great take on that, Paco. And yeah, if you are new to the wealth manager concept right now, this is truly something to investigate, regardless of where you are in the history and evolution of your business.
Yeah, it's a good article. There's a lot in here to digest. Probably a lot more than we can really even kind of go through here, because we were talking about things like avoiding fire sales and how to strategically plan for that. So why don't we just put a link to that article, but people go and check that out. Let us know what you think. Leave a comment. Send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. And if you want a coupon code, a 3-for-1 coupon code for wealth managers, reach out to Paco and he will provide that for you as well. So with that, wow, we're just rolling right along here. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to be right back where we are right now, talking with Paco in what would be part 2, but it will be part 3 if our interview does not get recorded tomorrow. But if all goes according to plan, we will be talking with Steve Alexander from MSP-Ignite here in just a second, and then Paco will be joining back with us again on the other side in part 3. So what's going to happen? I don't know. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in some form. Are you an MSP who is recommending Dell hardware to your end users? If so, then you'll want to check out the Dell Expert Network. The new Dell Expert Network program is a rewards and incentives program designed for service-focused MSPs who are supporting the small business market. This program is designed to deliver value and save time for MSPs who are recommending their end users to purchase Dell hardware. Currently, Dell Expert Network customers get an additional 3% back in Dell rewards when they buy Microsoft servers. Check out the Dell Expert Network today. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. We do not have our guest host with us here, Paco Lebron. We're kind of recording this episode a little bit out of order, so Paco wasn't able to kind of make it for this interview part. But that's okay. Paco will be back with us in part 3 when this is over. So stick around for that. But in the meantime, we've got a great interview guest lined up for you. I'm really excited to have him here. I've got a chance to meet him at a couple of our events that we've had where he's ran kind of like a peer group session, and it has been, I think, one of the highlights of the event for a lot of people. It was amazing to watch, lots of good energy. So it's awesome to have him here. There is not a lot of time left in 2022, but there are some things that you can do to prepare for a strong start in 2023. Now, here to talk about the power of peer groups and some of the best practices to follow is managed services consultant Steve Alexander from MSP-Ignite. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. I'm a little worried about that great guest comment you made, though, but we'll see what we could do.
Well, I told Rich to book a great guest. If you're not it, I guess we could just end this right now. No. We are very excited to have you here. And I already know myself that you're a great guest because, like I said, I've seen kind of how that session flowed at the couple events that you were at, and it really was a treat to watch, and everybody was like really into it and eyes glued. I always use the metric of if something is really valuable to people who are at a live event, the people who are getting something out of it are the ones that are not like on their phones or on their laptops. And there was like nobody on devices while that whole thing was going on. It was truly amazing. So I'm glad to have you here. I know there's a lot to talk about, but before we're going to dive into some of the nitty gritty though, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about MSP Ignite?
Sure, thanks. I appreciate the kind words as well. I fell into managed services long before I ever heard the term managed services or before it was even spoken about in the industry. I started my first business in 1990, and I very quickly, even though I had a sales background, I very quickly realized I didn't want to have to convince people to do business with me every year when I was renewing their services contracts. So I moved to a monthly way of doing it, right? Smaller amount, predictable. It was happening every month. They stopped questioning it. I tell people I did it because I was lazy, not because I was a genius. But then little by little, you realize, oh, I can do a lot more. I don't have to ask them questions. I built that business. I sold it. I worked for the people I sold it to, and I eventually bought them out, or at least part of their business out. Again, kind of fell in my lap, and I decided to do it for a while. In the interim, while I was working for them and I was not a business owner, I started a business advisory group, local, non-industry specific, started with my business advisors and other people wanting to join us. And that's how we started it. And from that moment on, I knew that peer advisory groups was something that was going to be a major part of my future. And actually, I was about to take out a big loan for expansion years later. And my accountant, who was one of those advisors, came in, threw the loan docs in the garbage and said, let's go to lunch and talk. And he literally said to me, I think you should sell the business. I think you should take the cash discount, no retention-based buyout, sell it, move on, and go do the business consulting and peer group stuff that you're actually so passionate about. Because truthfully, managed services or IT in general is something you like, but you're not passionate about. And that was the God's honest truth. So that's actually how MSP Ignite was formed. Was my accountant throwing a loan doc away and saying, don't borrow this money and don't grow this business anymore, and walk away. We sold the business within 30 days. We knew who the buyer was going to be already, someone that was trying to buy us previously. Went to lunch, told them the story, told them the numbers, and he said, I'll have you do due diligence with my CFO, and if everything is what you say, we'll buy it, but let's get it done before the 4th of July. And it was like June 1st when we were having this conversation, and we closed on July 5th. Of that same year. And I walked away and I did some business consulting for a while and started my first peer group, I want to say 9 years ago now. Today we have 15 groups and 135 or 40 members. And we really focus our energies on teaching people how to help each other. Not that my years of experience don't come into play, not that our other facilitators' years of experience don't come into play, but we really focus on members helping members, and that being our primary goal with what we do.
So let's talk about that for just a little bit on what
Sure.
kind of like what there may be some people out there that may not know what a peer group is or what they do. So why don't you just kind of define what you see a peer group as?
Yeah, it's a great question because people are using the term all over the industry. So I'll actually define that question a little different. I believe the focus should be on facilitator-run, independently owned peer groups to get the most out of the experience. Now, that does not mean that some of the other examples of what we can call a peer group aren't valuable, but I believe that in a group like ours, in a group like Taylor Business Group, which is one of our competitors, I don't mind mentioning them. I was actually on a peer call with one of the owners of Taylor Business Group this morning. We actually use each other for feedback. We get together, we talk. We don't talk about everything, obviously, but we talk about certain things. And I said, in my company and your company, there's one thing that's true. Our only mission, the only thing that drives us, the only thing our company and anyone working for us cares about is the success of our members. We don't care about what they buy. We don't care about what vendors they sign up for. We don't care about what meetings they go to, except for ChannelPro SMB forums, because we are a big part of that. So we want them at ChannelPro forums and everything else. We really only care about what their goals are and them achieving or surpassing those goals. What is a peer group? It's a group of people that have some commonality. In our case, they're business owners and they own MSPs. They have enough that separates them. In our case, they are geographically dispersed around the US and Canada so that they don't have to worry about competing with each other, and they can share ideas openly. And then some structure to it. For me, structure in business is pretty easy because everything's driven on your financials. And the average MSP owner isn't an accountant, wasn't trained to be a business owner, was probably an engineer or a tech of some sort, and they run their books the best way they can. It's not their fault that they don't run them tighter. We want to teach them how to look at their numbers as a foundational guide towards how to run the business and base everything off of that. All right. So everything we do is based on that and based on members helping other members avoid the mistakes they've made in life. Right. I use a phrase my father always used with me. And he said, everyone tells you have to learn from your mistakes. And that's very important in life. But if you want to truly be successful, learn from the mistakes of others. Listen, talk to people, find out what they've done to get to where they are. Even if you don't think they're all that successful, their mistakes can help you learn. And that's one of the guiding principles for us around peer groups.
Steve, regular listeners or viewers of this podcast, regular ChannelPro readers have heard us talk about peer groups for a long, long time. It's a topic that comes up, fairly regularly. And yet I honestly have no idea what the answer to this question is. If you had to guess, what percentage of MSPs out there are in a peer group of some kind right now? And what are maybe the barriers that keep more of them from participating?
It is a total guess, Rich. It's a great question. So it's a total guess. If I took into account the various descriptions of peer groups, so the ones that are run by a vendor who provides some similar peer advisory groups to their customers, the ones that are more peer community, if you will, than formal sit-down groups, I would venture to guess that 50% of the industry is in one, and about 20% of the industry participates in one. Right? So participating means showing up, being present, being involved, being open. All right. And to the second part of your question, the biggest barrier is fear. 100%. People will tell you, I don't have enough time. People will tell you how much, it's expensive, which it's not in comparison to other types of consulting you might engage somebody in. The biggest barrier is fear. And mostly the financial part that I talked about. All of a sudden, sharing your finances with somebody else, when you know in your heart of hearts your company is maybe not making as much money as it should, or you're not paying your people as much as you would like, or you're not paying yourself as much as you would like, that's a tough thing to do for people. Right? Those that are wildly successful have no problem doing it. But most of us are not wildly successful. We've achieved a level of success. We're in business. We're paying our bills. Hopefully, we're paying some other salaries too. We're taking money out for ourselves and taking care of our family. That, to me, is success. But if we don't have profits and funding retirement and funding growth and challenging our people to keep growing, then we're not probably achieving the level of success we would like to achieve. So I will tell you, fear is the biggest challenge.
One of the fears that I've heard through the years pretty regularly is this fear of getting in a room with other MSPs and giving away the recipe to my secret sauce, basically. And you sounds like one of the ways you address that in your peer groups is by the geographic distribution, so you're not competing against anyone else in the room. But then again, these days, everything's online, and now you can have customers all over the country. I mean, what do you say to people who are worried about opening up in front of other MSPs?
I should share this now. Both of you know this, but for the rest of the audience, I'm a New Yorker, born and bred New Yorker, which means I can be rather direct at times. Some would call it obnoxious at times, but I'll call it direct, right? There's no unique ideas out there. Let's be honest. Everyone that thinks they have a unique idea, they're copying it from somewhere. It may not even be the industry. It might be outside the industry, right? But there are no real unique ideas out there. And the truth is, ideas do not carry the day in business. There's no idea that is going to carry the day. It's execution that's going to carry the day. You are not going to lose by sharing your ideas. You're going to lose by not executing on them as well as someone else. So let's focus on executing. And if we share ideas, then we get help on the execution from others that might see a challenge that we're not seeing in our idea. So that's the biggest place that I'll look. I won't be as kind when I say it in a peer group. Like I said, I'm a New Yorker. I'll be a little more direct when I say it. But the truth is, even in a shrinking world, because that's what we're in, right? With the ubiquitous nature of the internet today, and we're all connected, and remote support can really be done in most places. Even with all of that, there's a lot of business out there for us all. And just focus on whatever couple of niches you want to focus on. You're not going to be in a room with a competitor. You're not. And as a good facilitator, we're watching for that. So, for example, if we see two people that have an idea that they want to take national that is going to conflict with each other, we're going to move one of them to another group. That's the beauty of having multiple groups, is we're going to say, I think you'd be better served sharing that idea in a different group, because we also have this person here who started down that path, right? And they might decide together, no, we trust each other and we want to stay in the same group because we want to go back and forth with each other on this idea. But then that'll be their choice. They'll come to us and tell us that.
I should mention I was born in New York as well, and my family moved away when I was quite young, but feel free to go full New York on our audience. Hold nothing back. They can take it. I want to give the audience a little bit more context about what Matt was talking about. You and our boss, Michael Siggins, ChannelPro's publisher, came up with this idea fairly well along into 2022 that we would use some of our time during the pre-day that we do at every one of our in-person events for a sort of ad hoc peer group. So we would invite basically the people who were attending the event, if they chose to participate in this peer group. They don't know each other. There's no shared history. They're not going to be meeting again. It's a totally ad hoc kind of experience. And I will say, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but we're doing this again in 2023, right?
We are. We've signed up for 8 events, I believe, for next year.
Perfect. Fantastic. One of the things that I noticed with a little bit of envy, actually, having attended the first 2 of these, was how good you are at getting people to talk to each other, speak up, and so on. One of the things that you said when you were talking about, what a good peer group has, is you said it should be facilitator led. And that presumably is something that you do. So what role does a facilitator play in a well-run peer group from your point of view?
The facilitator actually plays multiple roles, right? The one that most people come to the table thinking is going to be really what they do the most is provide input and consulting. And the truth is, a good facilitator pushes that to the back end and says, no, I'm only here to do it to keep the conversation moving, not to be the first one heard or the last one heard or the only one heard with input. It's to get everyone else to talk. So the primary reason for a facilitator is to learn how to challenge people to speak up, challenge people to pay attention and be present when someone else is speaking, so that their mind is going and they can think about wait a minute, I actually did something like this, and I can help them right now by giving them input and by pulling people in. But my most favorite situation in a peer group was my very first peer group. We had one member. He was in from the beginning. He was one of our first members. He's probably a year into a peer group, and he would start every single meeting with, really don't need any input. Everything's going great. Business is good, blah, blah, blah. And he wouldn't say much. And that would be it. And finally, another member, and I'm embarrassed that it wasn't me as a facilitator, another member said to him, hey, tell us where you suck. And he went, oh, okay. And he literally listed all these challenges that he was having in the business. And I sat there feeling like an idiot, quite honestly, for going, how did I never get him to that point? I mean, we're all in this together. It was my first group. So I was facilitating and learning the ins and outs of doing it better at the same time. And everyone else was sharing their challenges and problems. And he, for months, would just go, everything's great, business is good, profits are up, and then those words, tell us where you suck, somehow hit him like a 2x4 in the back of the head. And he just went and ran. We actually at one point had business cards or cards made up that said that. Tell us where you suck. And it really is what we want in peer group, right? Tell us where your challenges are. Now, the truth is a good facilitator is also getting people to start to think strategically and not just in the day-to-day and the tactical stuff that's going on, but say, okay, we asked you that question and that was important. So we know some of your challenges. Next question is, tell us where you want to go. Not just long-term, but short-term. Tell us where you want to be next year. We're looking at your financials. Where do you want your net profits to be next year? Right? What line items on here do you want to address and say, I got to figure out how to lower or increase? Maybe I need to invest more money in business development. So I know that my net profit's going to go down if I spend more money on business development until it clicks and raises the bar for us. So a good facilitator is challenging at all times to try and get the membership to be strategic, number one, to share openly what their challenges are, and to be, I always say the biggest challenge in peer group is people aren't honest. And I don't mean with each other. They're not honest with themselves. They're not honestly saying to themselves, I have problems, right? And once they do that, the rest is easier.
I'm sure the model for this varies. You were talking about, one of the things that you do in your peer groups is ask people, where do you want to go? You set a vision for the future. When I talk to peer group members and people who are enthusiastic about peer groups, one of the things they'll talk about is it's not just a conversation that you have on a regular basis with peers. There is homework between meetings, basically, and then there's accountability. You come back and you are accountable for having completed the homework and kind of presenting it. Talk a little bit about how that works, the degree to which that's a factor in your peer group, and the value that aspect of the peer group model provides.
Sure, and you saw a taste of this in the peer session. I try and make those larger peer sessions feel like a peer group. Obviously, everyone in the room doesn't know each other. They're all from the same regional area, so there's competition in the room. They're not prepared the same way a peer group member would be. But if you recall, I start every one of those sessions with, I'm going to go around the room as quickly as I can. Tell us what your biggest challenge right now is so that we can try and hone in on those topics. But I also challenge myself by saying at the end of this meeting, I want to know if anyone in this room does not have at least one actionable item from the conversation to go back and help them with a challenge. So far, we're batting 1,000. I haven't had one, right? I expect to maybe not resonate with someone or not be able to give input or not have anyone else in the room that can give input to a challenge. It'll happen, right? And we'll offer something else. So we always look at the accountability portion as you've taken up time in a peer group to share some of your challenges. Your fellow peer group members have given you suggestions. We call them action items. At the end of every meeting, every formal meeting, we're actually going to say, tell us what your action items are from this time we just spent together. we're going to record what they are. And if you don't bring them up to us at the next meeting, we're going to ask you, hey, what did you do about this? What action did you take on that new initiative you were going after, right? What did you do about the fact that you had two people in critical roles that don't seem to be able to work together? How did you handle it? What actions have you taken? So that's always a key component, that every meeting, everyone knows they're going to be called upon to justify the advice they got previously. And they could come back and say, after thinking about what everyone in this room said, I realized none of you know what you're talking about, and I've done nothing yet, right? Well, okay, if you've done nothing, then maybe you need to revisit that. Or they might say, took all the advice, really appreciate it, decided to go in a different direction. Here's what I did. That's okay too. And we do that with numbers too. Everyone has to share their financials at every meeting too. So if they're not prepared to talk about their financials, that's another area of accountability. It's the area everyone's afraid of, right? Unless business is great, then they're not afraid of them. And they all know we have a portal and we pull the numbers ourselves, but we want their input on the numbers.
Some obvious answers to this next question might be, show up, speak up, be honest. But I mean, if you were to give advice to folks in the audience who are in or inclined to join a peer group about how to really get value from that, the value that it's capable of providing, what advice would you offer?
All of those examples you gave are accurate, but it comes down to one thing: be present. When you're at a peer group meeting, we always say this: if you're at a client meeting and your phone vibrated, would you take your phone out of your pocket and look at it, or out of your purse and look at it? Probably not. You're at a client meeting. It's a new prospect. You're trying to sell to them. Treat peer group the same way. You are in a meeting. You're in a closed door meeting. Anything that's happening in the outside world can wait until you take a break from the meeting. And we do take frequent breaks. Are there exceptions? Of course there are. Could something pop up on a phone that's family related and someone runs out of the room? Of course they could. But by being present, what we mean is, don't be researching some company that someone mentioned 40 minutes ago on your computer while Rich is now sharing some of what's going on in his business, right? Be present in Rich's world because he's speaking right now. Be listening, be thinking about it, and be thinking about it for Rich, not for yourself. So when we talk about being present, we spend time talking about this quite a bit. Rich could start talking about a new idea he has. Matt could go, oh man, that's a great idea. I wonder how he's addressing this and this and this. And he starts asking questions. But Matt's questions are actually somewhat self-serving for him. They're not helping Rich answer the question he has about where he is in the process. So there is a place for your self-serving questions. They're not wrong, but if Rich has the floor and we're trying to help Rich, let's not divert the questions to Matt, right? Let's stay there. So by be present means a lot of different things. That's number one. The second I said earlier is you need to be open and honest if you want to benefit. You need to share. You need to think ahead about where your challenges really are, not bury your head in the sand about them because that was yesterday. That's not a challenge anymore. Well, it is if you didn't address it, right? So therefore, let's think about it. Those are the two biggest areas.
Pivoting away from peer groups now here, Matt was kind of talking when he set this conversation up. We're at the beginning of December now, the home stretch of 2022 and sort of the last opportunity for folks who are listening or watching to set themselves up for a strong start in 2023. I talk often to managed services consultants about this kind of thing. I mean, what is your advice for wrapping up the year? What things should people be doing, thinking about in these next few weeks before the holidays to really kind of get themselves off to a fast start in the new year?
Well, now talking about self-serving, I'm going to go to this one first, but I really do believe this. And again, I mentioned a competitor earlier in this call or on this session, and he and I just had the same conversation. If I talk to someone about peer groups, and for whatever reason they find a peer group other than MSP-Ignite that they join, and I see them 6 months or a year later, and they tell me, "Hey, thanks to you, I went out and joined a peer group. Here's the one I chose to join." I'm going to applaud them. I'm going to celebrate that they did that, because I firmly believe that not only every business owner, but everyone that's in a decision-making role in our companies needs to be in a formal peer group where they can talk about the challenges, talk about how to get past it, talk about the initiatives they want to go after, and get input from others. So yes, it's self-serving, but I do believe this is the most important thing. Do not wait to join a peer group. So if you want to set yourself up for 2023, we got a whole month left in 2022. Join a peer group. Join now so that you're starting the process for next year. There's a sentence or a phrase that comes out of every new member I've ever had that I share with people when we talk about this. Every single one. When they come to their first 2-day formal meeting where we're together and getting pretty in-depth on conversation, they come to their first one and the meeting ends and everyone's hugging and saying goodbye as they rush to their flights. And every single person, when it's their first meeting, says some form of this to me at the end. I'm really pissed off that I waited so long to join a peer group. I wasted the last X number of years in business by not being in something like this. And that's so over and above anything else I'm going to say to answer that question, Rich, be in a peer group, be in a formal one that is facilitator-led, that can give you input and help steer you, right? The others are the more obvious ones, right? Get your financials in order, put a budget in place for 2023. Many, as I said earlier, many people don't even understand how to do that, how to set up a budget. Well, all I know is I want to grow by this at the end of the year. Okay, well, when are you going to have to hire people to make sure that happens? What are your sales efforts going to have to be? How about your marketing efforts? And even though we all say sales and marketing together, they are two different things and they need to be addressed separately, not I'm going to hire this one person and that's going to solve all my problems. Because the truth is, no, it's not. No one person's going to fix your biz dev problems. No one, right? You guys know Ashley that works for me, so don't tell her I said that. Hopefully she doesn't see this.
Another topic I've been talking about a lot, not only with experts like yourself, but with vendors and so on. We're wrapping up a year that has been a pretty good one for managed services, but we're heading into a year where people are wondering, is this going to be a recession year? I mean, it's looking like it probably is to some extent. And the question is how severe a recession. Again, I got to believe this is something that people in your peer groups are talking about. What advice do you have for folks in the audience about, preparing for or not preparing? What should people do differently, if anything, given that we have these sort of choppy waters maybe in front of us?
Well, first and foremost, have some cash reserves, right? And if you don't now it's going to be hard to build that. But everyone's business model part of their business model should be putting cash away so that, in rough times, you can still get through them, right? That's first part. But, I've been doing this for a long time. We've been through recessions. We've been through crashes. We've been through all kinds of things. We've been through a pandemic now and something different that we've never been through. And through all of those changes, right, no matter what happens, those that are prepared and understand their model, their business model, their costing model, and therefore their pricing model, always succeed and frequently thrive in difficult times, right? If you don't really understand your costs, then whatever you're charging your customers is a guess, right? Somewhat educated, but not fully educated guess. And if you don't understand your costs in tough times when customers are coming to you saying, I got to cut back costs everywhere I can, what can you do for me? You have no idea how to answer the question. You're guessing at an answer. If you're really dialed in and understand your costs, you know what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. You know that you might be able to cut your prices by 10% and not have it really hurt you all that much. And therefore, maybe people that are coming to you, you should do that. Maybe you should start there. You should know what services you're providing that maybe some of your customers could do without, and therefore lower your cost and theirs by doing so, right? You should also know how many endpoints or end users you can support with how many technical resources, because if it gets really tight, you are going to have to look at that, right? And say, wow, do I have to let someone go? Or do I, or hopefully not. And hopefully it's just, I have to hold off on hiring. Even though we normally have hit a point where we would hire, maybe I don't because I'm a little concerned, right? And that is happening. You can see it out there. You can see the larger vendors that have the ability to do more studies on what's going on with the economy and look at it. You can see them holding back on spending money right now, right? We both work with vendors and have sponsorships and things like that. They're not saying no, they're saying not now, right? They're saying I'm going to wait through Q1 before I do anything, right? Which automatically means Q1 is going to be tight because people aren't spending money because they're waiting to see what happens, right? And this is the way the economy works, that we all have to watch for it. So we have to watch for that too, you know? And those that aren't dialed in shouldn't panic. They should kind of take a methodical approach to that and say, well, first and foremost, what does it mean to understand my costs? And most people don't. They don't understand their labor costs. They don't understand how many hours they spend putting in solutions, supporting clients, and things of that nature. And they've got to spend the time to look at those things and understand them.
Really good advice and a good place probably to say. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So, but no, I think you gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about. Really good conversation, really good discussion, and probably something actionable. If anybody wants to learn a little bit more about the peer groups and MSP-Ignite, or connect with you to kind of pick your brain a little bit more on what they can do to kind of help make their business stronger, where would they go? How would they find you?
Easiest thing to do is just go to our website, MSP-Ignite.com. That's the easiest thing to do. There's a place to contact us, and you can give us your name and we'll reach out to you. They can certainly feel free. I don't mind giving my email address out. It's steve.a@msp-ignite.com. And I want to give something to your listeners since it is the beginning of December and we did say, what do we do to get ready for 2023? I want to give them something. My first suggestion, my self-serving one, but still the one I believe in the most, was join a peer group. So for any of your listeners, anyone that mentions ChannelPro and they reach out to us, if they reach out to us and they join a peer group by the end of this year, by the end of this month, we're going to give them 50% off the first 6 months membership.
Wow. Just
for being here, for listening to this, and for taking action, because quite honestly, that's my way of congratulating them and saying, you took an action. You heard about it and you jumped. So we'll give them 50% off on their membership for the first 6 months that they join. And our memberships are month to month. So they could take advantage of that and decide they're done if that's what they want to do. I'm betting they won't, but so let me throw that out there.
It's a great offer. Thank you for sharing that with our audience, and I really do hope that some of them take advantage of that and reach out to you and get started on the path of making their business better and getting ready for a strong 2023. So awesome stuff, Steve. Thank you so much for being on. I'm sure we'll probably have you on again. Folks, don't forget to also go to events.channelpronetwork.com and start signing up for some of our regional events. Look for one that's in your area. Make it a point to go to one of them, and make sure to make it a point to go to the pre-day and check out if you're on the fence or not sure and you wanted to kind of wait until you could kind of see what it's like. Make sure you go and do one of those as well. And check it out. So lots of good advice there. And with that, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, Paco Lebron will be back with us on the other side, and we will break down the show, have a little fun. What are we going to do? Because we recorded that part yesterday, I know exactly what we're going to do, but you don't know. So you're going to have to stay tuned and find out. We will be right back. And we are back now with part 2 or 3 of ChannelPro Weekly, depending on what just happened right before the break. So if there was a great interview with Steve Alexander, I'm sure it was a great interview. If there was not, there will be an interview with Steve Alexander at some point in the near future. So stay tuned for that. But Rich, let's assume the interview happened. How'd it go?
If it happened, I am sure it was really, really great, because we would have been speaking with him about community and peer groups, and you and I have both attended a couple of peer groups that he has led at at our shows, and they've been just, I mean, you know, as a fly on the wall, they've been great to attend. So, you know, assuming he showed up, and I'm sure he did, it was interesting to get into that topic with a guy who kind of sees that and facilitates that firsthand.
Yeah, I will say that I can't speak for the interview. Don't know what happened. We don't know because we don't know what happened. But I will say I agree with you because I was there for those peer group sessions that they did before our shows that we had, and I think he did too. And everybody who was there afterwards was like, "Wow, that was just awesome! Like that was so worth my time. I need to know more about this." Paco, just are you involved in any peer groups?
Yeah, a few. ASCII. The others are escaping me right now, but yeah, I mean, we have our own little. You know, I think communities, and peer groups are so important, because that's where you get the most value, right? I think every show you always remember how they make you feel, and the content is always great. But I think it's those hallway conversations where I always make this fun thing where it's like the magic happens, and it's what I say in the show. But you know, peer groups are so important, especially if you can get a really tight knit one that is really about what you're doing, whether that's demographics, tool sets, et cetera, and you're bouncing ideas off each other of what you're trying to do. It's just so invaluable to have a peer group. So I'm sure the interview was very informative, and why that's important to find a peer group like ASCII, you know, Tech Tribe, all those, et cetera.
Yeah, we've talked to a lot of expert MSPs, very successful ones, and one of the common threads that I've always noticed is that the ones who are the most successful are generally the ones that are the most connected and are involved in peer groups, the community, and getting advice and not trying to do it alone. So it's definitely a good thing to check out, and hopefully if assuming the interview happened, and if it didn't happen, it'll happen down the road. You get a lot out of that, and if you're not involved in a peer group, you'll certainly think about doing so. So Rich, we've got Paco here, and we've got a little game we've been kind of playing with all of our guests lately, since we've for many of them we've not only asked them 5 questions, we've asked them like 15. So we've been playing a lot of verses lately just because it's something new, and eventually we're gonna have to come up with another new game, but this is the one we're doing these days, and it's a fun one. And you had a controversial idea for this one. For anybody who's in the Chicagoland area, you might need to like plug your ears, because this is going to be painful.
You know, in some ways, it is an absolutely perfect idea for this show. So, but my thinking, folks, was I've got 2, not 1, but 2 people on the show with me from Chicago or the Chicago area right now, and you know, they're known for their pizza in Chicago, but they are also known for hot dogs, and so we could play a round of verses about hot dog toppings. But the controversy, as Matt is hinting at, is, you know, this is a pick one, and you don't pick one hot dog topping. So what we're essentially doing here is saying, if some guy from Seattle like Rich Freeman limits you to one topping, which is the wrong way to eat your hot dog, which is the topping that wins out.
Yeah, in Chicago, there are many toppings that go on a hot dog. So for those who are not from Chicago or do not know what a Chicago style hot dog is, the arrangement of toppings goes something like this. There is mustard, there is onions, there is pickles. There's usually a pickle spear, tomato, sport pepper, celery salt. I feel like I'm missing one.
Relish.
And relish. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I was missing one, and there's like relish in there, that neon green relish, celery salt, and with a Vienna beef hot dog. That is the only way to eat a hot dog, by the way. I know that many people are going to argue with me, but I'm telling you, that is the only way. That is the way I eat a hot dog, and it is always a delightful treat. But the idea of not being able to, only being able to have one of those is a scary proposition. So but not everybody eats their Chicago. So I will ask this to start. Paco, do you eat your hot dog Chicago style, or do you eat them another way?
I do eat it another way, so which will get me booted from Chicago. But my one topping that I normally do is with ketchup. I know,
No.
the Chicago sin. I know, but I will say it has to be beef, and it has to be Vienna beef. It is, if none of this Oscar Mayer stuff, none of this whatever. It's got to be Vienna beef, in my opinion, to be a good hot dog, or Polish sausage.
or that. That's the dog itself is very, very important. I just have to alert you that I've told authorities that you've put ketchup in your hot dogs. They're going to be there to escort you out of the city, Chicago proper, in the very near future. Hopefully, the show will be over by the time they get you out of there. So Rich, so here's how I think we should play this. We'll play a round of verses, but we're gonna see if there's something other than ketchup that so let's not throw ketchup into the mix because we know that's what he normally goes for. Let's see if we could find his other, like if he had to choose any other topping, what would it be? So Rich, you can go ahead and go first.
And should I start with the classic Chicago hot dog ingredients there, and let's just sort of sift out the winners from the losers? Or
let's
just
do that.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's talk about onions versus the pickle spear.
That's tough because I don't like either.
Which is the most
least,
appetizing of the two?
Yeah, it would have to be onions then. I'd go on that route.
Okay, so we've got onions. Let's go onion versus sport peppers.
Sport peppers for sure.
Okay, so you like spicy. Let's keep that in mind. Rich, over to you.
Okay. The peppers or how about cheese?
Oh, you can't go wrong with cheese. You know, everything cheesy is always good. So I have to go with cheese.
Okay, so we're going out of the realm of Chicago style into other things you can put on a hot dog. Let's see what we can find. Cheese versus chili.
I would have to go with chili.
Ooh, chili. Yeah, chili dog is delicious. Although you kind of have to have cheese with those, but it would even be just good just with chili. Rich, can you beat chili?
Boy, that's a tough one. I was kind of heading in that direction too. Chili. Gosh, what else? What have we missed here? Well, I guess this gets us back into the it's going to be hard for this to compete with chili, but this gets us back to the classic ingredients: chili versus the tomatoes.
Don't like tomatoes. I got to stick with chili.
Going with chili. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to exit the vegetable route and find other things that you can put on a hot dog. And there's probably a lot of things. Chili's gonna be tough to beat though. Let's say chili versus, what do they put on hot dogs in Seattle? Do they put like cream cheese?
They do.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Well, it's different than cheese. Let's say, all right, so chili versus cream cheese.
I do like cream cheese, but I gotta stick with the chili dog there.
Stick with chili. Rich, I don't think we're gonna beat chili. Let's see what you got.
Oh, what do I have that even can compete with chili? What am I missing? Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, you know what comes to mind, and this is so off the wall, but many years ago, I lived in Los Angeles, and there was a place I used to like to go to with friends at 1 a.m. when you had been maybe consuming alcohol and you wanted some real heavy starchy something, and they served a hot dog with bacon on it, which was pretty irresistible. So okay, chili versus bacon.
I gotta go with bacon. You can't beat bacon.
Rich, you top chili, you went to bacon. I wasn't thinking that one, but nothing beats bacon, right?
Yeah.
That really is the ultimate. I don't know if there's anywhere else to go. Okay, well, I'll end it with a hard one because we know you don't have ketchup. So let's end it on that. Bacon versus ketchup.
Yeah, I gotta go with.
You only have one. You got a hot dog.
Only have one.
You got ketchup and you've got bacon, and you're only allowed one of those on the hot dog.
I am a saucy guy, so I gotta go with ketchup. And
ketchup, in Paco's mind, reigns supreme over bacon, at least in the form of hot dog toppings. So kudos to ketchup. Now, is there a particular brand of ketchup? Because I know some people are very particular about ketchup.
So it used to be I was a big Heinz man for so long until one random day, my fiance wanted ketchup, and we were at a nearby, I forgot, a small little grocery store, and we picked up Hunt's ketchup. and Hunt's ketchup has been a primary staple in the LeBron household for sure. So that is definitely the ketchup we default to on the side of Heinz. That is for sure.
Wow, a lot of people will never leave Heinz behind. Hunt's is pretty good though. I won't argue. I think here in this house it's Heinz. Rich, do you have a ketchup you gravitate towards?
Heinz, but now I'm curious. I'll try Hunt's next time.
Yeah, maybe I'll give Hunt's another shot too. I know sometimes like I'm sure I've had it because like sometimes like that's all you get in the packet at restaurants or whatever. But I never really like did a comparison like this is better than the other. But I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try that and see how it goes. So fun, interesting to learn about hot dog toppings, folks. What do you like to put on your hot dogs? There are many different things you could put on it. So let us know in the comments area or send us an email podcast@ChannelProNetwork.com. Let us know what you like. So before we say goodbye to Paco, Rich, why don't you tell us if we have anything that in case you missed it post, if we have one of those this week, and tell us what we might have missed, because I know we had like the Thanksgiving holiday and we had other stuff. There's no show, so there might be some stuff there that we missed, and what might be coming up ahead.
Yeah, well, we do have, in case you missed it, a roundup piece by our own James Gaskin this week. Mentioned before, AWS is doing reInvent this week. Torrent of news out of that show. James is going to give you the stuff that you actually need to know about most. He's got some information about some new small business access points and some other stuff from Zeisel, a new mobile security awareness training app from KnowBe4, and a story about speaking of cheese, a woman in Florida who was so upset about the misleading instructions on a package of macaroni and cheese that she is suing Kraft for $5 million. James will tell you all about that. Coming up next week, our show, December 7th, the Cybersecurity Online Summit, we were telling you about that. I'll just kind of hint that there will be a soft launch of some interesting news from CompTIA that they will actually be announcing for the first time during that show, and I'll be writing about that too, so be on the lookout for that. Some news from a major infrastructure hardware maker. I won't tell you which one. Interesting little bit of an RMM news, so lots of stuff coming up next week.
Ooh, well, keep an eye out for all of that stuff. Very interesting. What could possibly be in the directions of macaroni and cheese that you could sue for? I have to go check that out. That's just completely ridiculous to me. But I gotta go read more about that. That's crazy. Big thanks to Paco Lebron, the main man over there at ProdigyTeks, host of the MSP Unplugged podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, it's always a good time with you guys, definitely, and any of the events too. I mean, I think, and I've said this before, ChannelPro is always an event, or all their events that I can make it to is usually on the forefront of any other event. It's just the way that you all do your content is just by far stellar than any of the shows that I go to. You could just tell the investment on making that good. So if you haven't been to a ChannelPro event, make it one that you go to next year. Definitely check out the virtual event next week. You may be zoomed out from all the years of having Zoomed, but I can guarantee you this is one of those that you will not be disappointed to.
Good. Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, folks. I didn't pay him to say that. He said it on his own. Listen to him. He's a very, very wise man, believe me. And Paco, for anybody who wants to learn more about you, connect with you, learn about where to find your podcast, where can they go? How can they do that?
Sure. Yeah. You can, if you want to talk to me, you can find me over on LinkedIn, Paco Lebron. I should be the only one that comes up there. Obviously with the last name, very unforgettable. I always like to open up where just like the basketball player, but none of his money. So you can definitely go ahead and find me on LinkedIn. If you want to check out the podcast, again, we do it twice a week. You can find us on all podcatchers or on YouTube, MSP Unplugged. Again, I'm with my good friend and co-host Rick Smith over in Renactus Technology with his MSP in New Jersey. So again, we just do a lot of talking back and forth of our experiences, other tech's experiences, and a lot of get to know resources in this space. So those are where you can find us. I encourage everyone to go and check that out as well. And of course, where should you go? Also, every day, each and every day, ChannelProNetwork.com is the website to go to. Set it as your homepage, bookmark it, whatever it is. Make sure you visit it regularly, because there you'll find the latest news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, all kinds of great stuff to not only keep you on top of what's going on in this fast-moving industry, but also give you some sound advice on how to better run your business, or make more money, or save more money, or manage your wealth, or in the case of ChannelPro Weekly, learn about which hot dog toppings reign supreme.
we cover it all here, folks. That's why it's important to go to channelpronetwork.com and get all of that as well. And then of course you can follow Channel Pro Weekly as well. We're same with the MSP Unplugged podcast. We're on all the different podcatchers. Just go and subscribe there. All of those. If you want, we're also on YouTube. You can subscribe there as well. If you do, hit the bell, hit the like button, hit this. Paco knows about buttons. Just hit them all, and it's all good. And yeah, that's gonna do it for episode 248. So thanks to all involved, and we will see everybody in next week. See you then.